Hello everybody, my name is Jared, and today we are going to be doing another in my watercolour series, where I paint a watercolour portrait of every one of my D&D themed characters. These characters are all from the webcomic I Am a Criminal. If you want to read I Am a Criminal, the link is in the description below. It is on Webtoon, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. There's a lot of content of it now. I believe when this goes up there should be at least 10 chapters of the comic. The comic is LGBT, it is fantasy, obviously because it's set in the D&D universe. There's a lot of interesting characters, and hopefully you'll think it's got pretty art. So without much more discussing about me plugging my comic, let's move on to what I'm actually working on in this video. This is the last in the watercolour series. This is my watercolour portrait of Haven. Haven is a Aasimar. If you don't know what an Aasimar is, in the D&D universe there are things called Aasimar and Celestials. I have previously, I believe, explained a Tiefling a little bit, but they are kind of like the polar opposite of a Tiefling. A Celestial is essentially an angel in D&D world, and a Aasimar is a descendant of a Celestial, usually created with another human or another race. So Aasimar are essentially part angel. Most of the time Aasimar will lean towards good alignments. They are very drawn towards religion or faith. A lot of the time they'll become things like clerics or paladins. Aasimar also have a natural effect on people to be more comfortable around them. Now, I love that and all, but my Aasimar is not very charming at all. When I explain Haven to people, I say that I intentionally made a character that was the opposite of my initial idea of what I was going to make if I made a Celestial. So, Haven came about. If you want to know more about Haven, I won't go into a super large amount of detail in this video about him personally, purely because he doesn't come into the comic for quite a while, and I don't want to spoiler that, because even explaining how he comes into the comic is a spoiler for later events of the comic. So, I'm going to be intentionally a little bit vague about Haven, but I will go into a little bit more detail about what I'm doing in this video. As you saw at the beginning, I did some little colour thumbnails of him. His was fairly easy because I kind of knew the colours I was going to go for already, and I had a basic idea of what the posing was going to be because I'd already done some digital doodles to see what I would like for him. But I went for a very stereotypical him pose, and yeah, just kept it very this one is very basic because I wanted to go into a lot of detail on him personally rather than on the background. So a lot of the other ones have got quite a lot of background, whereas this one has a very simple artsy background. So yeah, I figured out the basic colours that I wanted to use. Again, fairly easy because I already know his colour scheme, I just needed to know how to balance the background elements and things like that. And yeah, I went straight into the sketching. I am quite familiar with drawing Haven. He is one of the characters that I doodle the most. My partner would definitely say that he is my favourite, but I tend to lean that I've got other characters that are my favourite in the I Am a Criminal cast. But Haven is easily the character I draw the most. So, with already having a very good idea of how I draw him, it didn't take me very long to sketch him out. It just was sort of like a fast, okay, it's his face, it looks like this. The reason that he has the colour scheme that he does as well is he's based on the lapis lazuli gem. So, all of the Aasimar that we have in this plot are all based on gems from different gem types. So, there's one based on Tiger's Eye, this one is based on Lapis Lazuli. Another thing that I would say here is Haven uses he/him pronouns. A lot of people who've seen Haven on TikTok have assumed he's a girl. He's not a girl, he is a boy. He's quite feminine looking, so I'm just putting that out there for the comments. He's a boy, so yeah, once the sketch was done, I went straight into inking. I followed my usual inking technique. If you've watched any of the other watercolour videos, you know how this goes. All I do is a thicker, darker line around the edges, particularly where the light is hitting them the least. And then I do a thinner sort of gentler line on the inside of the drawing and on the bits where the light is hitting it more. This just makes your line art a little bit more 3D. I also recommend just filling in the little corners where there's a lot of shadow with a little bit more of a thick line. That will also help to make your drawing pop and look a little bit more 3D. The ink work didn't take very long for this one. It's always the fastest part for me because I've already figured everything out in the sketching phase. But yeah, I just sort of like threw that inking out. I was pretty happy with how it came out. I wish I'd gone into a little bit more detail on his clothing, but otherwise I'm pretty happy with how it worked. Then we went into flat colours. My flat colours are obviously based on lapis lazuli, so I mixed myself a nice rich blue, a couple of dark shades of that rich blue, and a lot of gold. I actually went into this afterwards with a tiny bit of gold pen just to sort of like pick up on the really, really bright gold bits, but mostly I just used a warm kind of like almost sitting on the brown yellow shade to mimic the gold effect in watercolour. I would like to try gold watercolours at some point. Does anybody have any that they would like recommend? Because I've been seeing a lot of channels saying that some are really good and then other channels are saying stuff's really bad. So yeah, I think I need to do a little bit more research, but if you have any recommendations, let me know. So my flat colours, obviously we've got this pastel-y blue that we put down first. I just keep going in layers with watercolour because otherwise I feel like I always end up with a way too dark image. So I do a really, really, really pale, really light layer and then do another one on top and another one on top until I get to the colour I want. It's probably not the best system, but it's how I avoid my image looking oversaturated. When shading skin tones that are non-human, like Haven's, I try and, since I'm working from blue, I try and mix in a little bit of red as I get darker. I also add a little bit of red to his cheek area, so we've got kind of like a blush coming through on the underside. It just adds to the skin tone looking more natural than if you were just using a darker shade of blue for pretty much everything. He will just sort of start to look like he's almost made of jelly, like that not natural, non-human skin. You want skin to look like it's kind of got things underneath it. This is a weird way to describe this, but it's the best way to make the skin look like it's real and natural. I also used a tiny bit of yellow in highlighting. This yellow highlight, again, just, it seems like it's almost reflecting the yellow bits of the gold on him, which looks really interesting. And also it can mimic the like light hitting the face. It just helps to, again, make it look a little bit more 3D and more rendered. I am by no means an expert on watercolour. I say this in every video, but I've only been doing watercolour kind of seriously for about I would say less than a year. And I've been sort of absorbing information from different YouTubers, but I'm still kind of finding my feet with it. So if there's anything I'm doing that you're like, oh no, please don't do that, again, let me know in the comments, because if you guys know anything that would help me, I would love it. Now there are flowers at the top of this one. The flowers I chose to use are lilies and roses. The reason for that is they are traditionally funeral flowers, and if you were touching on spoilers here, if you know Haven's character at all, funerals and death are very important, so I have to be very, very particular about making sure that the elements that I add to my drawings aren't there unintentionally just to fill space. They're all there for reasons. So the flower wreath that I have around the top of him is meant to represent a funeral wreath, and yeah, that's that kind of like arch of pretty flowers at the top. That's what that's for. I kept them intentionally a little vague and not very detailed, just purely to kind of draw the attention away from them and back onto him. And then I have the black like goopy hand that's going around near his face. That, I'm still not happy with how that one came out. I did a red underlay to try and give it more life, but I think I just should have done it jet black. I almost wish I'd done it like with ink rather than watercolour because I just couldn't get that black saturated enough. So yeah, next time I try and paint Haven in watercolour, I will probably just use ink for the hand, but you know, I've learnt something today. The question that I'm asking in the comments today, sometimes I'd like to ask a question for you guys to like answer in the comments. My question today is, do you play D&D? And if so, do you have any D&D characters that you want to share with people? I'd love to hear about what your favourite character you've played as is, or what character you'd love to play as if you got a chance to play D&D. As I said before, if you want to know anything more about the characters that are in this watercolour series, please do go read my series, I'm a Criminal, on Webtoon. It is in the description, and also you can learn more about them by going to my Instagram. My Instagram is also in the description. It is my art Instagram, so I'd click on that one, and there are some pages on there that will tell you a little bit more about the characters that have been introduced. So this is my finished watercolour. I hope you guys will enjoy it, and as always, please remember to be creepy.